I'm Jay Moran.
I'm Bridget Jaipal Valenza.
I'm Thomas O'Neill White.
I'm Angela Preston.
And I'm Lorenzo Rodriguez.
This is What's Next, a dedicated hour to have important conversations about the issues facing the marginalized and underrepresented communities of Western New York and Southern Ontario.
We're going to have some real healing. We've got to have space to tell some uncomfortable truth.
What's Next continues our mission to discuss race,
Equity, and the common concerns of Buffalo's East Side
and beyond.
The suburban area, everywhere. We must work and teach our children.
Well, look at that. We're starting off our field trip, our What's Next field trip already, with a sight that I've yet to see ever in my life in person, a hummingbird.
That would make it your life bird.
Oh. Wait, a life bird? What?
A life bird. The first time that you see an individual species, for the very first time, birders refer to that bird being your life bird. So the first time you saw that species for the first time in your life. Yeah. So now you got your lifer, ruby-throated hummingbird, which is our one hummingbird that visits the eastern United States.
Oh, I'm already thrilled for what's to come. This is going to be good. This is going to be a lot of fun. And good morning. Welcome to What's Next. My name is Lorenzo Rodriguez, and this is a special one today. We're nearing the end of summer here in Western New York. I feel like summers get shorter and shorter out in these parts. But you know what? We are people that really, truly enjoy the limited time that the summer offers. And today, What's Next is leaving the confines of our studios in downtown Buffalo to venture out into the great wilderness. The wilderness right in our backyard. Literally 15 minutes away from downtown Buffalo is a gem of nature out here in Western New York. I'm here at the Reinstein Woods Nature Preserve, and I think I've got one of the better tour guides out there in the business, at least in the Western New York area, Mr. Marcus Rosten. How are you?
I'm doing well. Welcome to Reinstein Woods Nature Preserve.
Marcus, you are a environmental educator. You've been doing this now for
almost 10 years now.
And as an environmental educator, I mean, I think it's in the name, but what does that entail?
Yeah, an environmental educator is somebody who is a naturalist, usually engaged in the natural world, and what they do is they communicate that science and they connect people to their natural world, their environment, or scientific principles and processes.
You're a facilitator because really I feel like anybody and everyone should be able to just go out into nature and kind of just explore. And I mean, it's great to have a tour guide because I have a limited knowledge base of animals and wildlife, but not of Western New York. I'm excited to hear what you have to say about what we're going to hopefully see, because we're here on a Wednesday morning in the middle of August, and hopefully you said that mating season for birds is done and over with.
Yeah, in terms of birds, this is a little bit more of a quieter season. As much as we don't want to admit it, the birds have acknowledged that fall is just around the corner. So our birds, they're getting ready. Instead of hanging out and singing their hearts out, they're getting ready to migrate south for the winter. So things get a little bit quieter this season, but we'll see what we can hear out here.
So as far as Western New York wilderness and the wildlife out there, seasonally, how does it differ?
In terms of birds, we are a just like, we like to refer to Buffalo being a four-season region. The birds respond in that same way. Depending on what season it is going to greatly influence what birds you see around here. During the summer is birds' breeding season, so that is when you have the resident birds that will come up to Western New York from as far south as the southeastern United States, Central America. Some even travel as far as South America. And they come and make Western New York their home for the summer. So they hang out here during that season, and that is who you are likely to find. As fall moves through, those birds, they start to pick up after they have their young grows up, they're able to fly, fend for themselves. They start to head back south.
So swallows go back to Capistrano.
Yeah.
That's a very dated reference. I'm sorry about that. But that's the only song I know about bird migration. But that's what they do in the fall, right?
Yeah, and then in fall you start to see those transitory birds that might just pass through western New York for a season as they are moving to their wintering habitat. Essentially, they'll stop over in western New York. So we are located on the Atlantic Flyway, which is a term that describes the paths that huge quantities of birds take as on their migration journey. So there are a couple of major flyways in the United States. We here in Western New York, we're located on the Atlantic Flyway. So in the fall, we start seeing birds move through here, coming from the boreal forest in Canada all the way up to the Arctic Circle. They'll start moving through Western New York on their journey south. Winter, we start to see our birds that are year-round residents, so things quiet out a little bit more. We have our chickadees, our cardinals hanging out, but Western New York happens to be a world-class birding destination in the winter, is where we get our claim to fame. We get all
like Arctic birds that come down
Yes.
here. They migrate down to our somewhat milder temperatures compared to what they're used to.
We're used to calling people snowbirds in Western New York that head down to Florida for the winter.
We've got our own.
We are those birds, Florida. So for those Arctic species like snowy owls, they will come to spend their winters here in Western New York, where we have always flowing fresh water, thanks to our Niagara River and Niagara Falls, a huge food source. So we are essentially that bird's winter paradise. So we'll have birders come from around the world to Western New York just to see those birds that hang out here in the winter. And then as soon as spring comes, they're moving back on and we start to cycle over again.
I love it. Well, this is just the beginning. Follow us, come along with us. We're going to take a little auditory excursion here on What's Next at Reinstein Woods Nature Preserve. Let's do this. Let's. People might be asking, our listeners might be asking, all right, why are we doing a nature show? But recently, the reason that I came to you, Black Birders Week. It's a thing now that I think it's in its 4th year, correct?
Yes.
Just this year in 2023. And the genesis of Black Birders Week in particular was something that drew my attention. A gentleman by the name of Christian Cooper, a birder himself, a person of color, out in Central Park, just minding his own business, watching birds, and got into an altercation with a white lady in Central Park, claimed that he was attacking her when all he said was basically very politely, hey, could you just leash up your dog? And what came about from that was, well, I'll let you explain it, because you're pivotal in the Western New York side of the Black Birders movement.
Yeah, I serve on the planning team for Black Birders Week, so very proud to represent Buffalo in that. And yeah, Black Birders Week, born out of a horrific event in Central Park, but recognizing that clearly people are viewing black people in nature as a threat, we realized that we need to bring awareness to the fact that Black people are birders, Black people are out in the wild, we're not a threat, nothing to call the cops on, and to increase this representation in a field that happens to be very white historically. So Black Birders Week, mobilized primarily as a social media campaign. This is happening in 2020 in the midst of the pandemic.
Big national, I mean, if I'm not mistaken, it was the same day, unfortunately, the passing of George Floyd. So it was
Yes.
big day for just racial tensions in America. And the good here is that it's galvanizing a community that's been there. But I would say, I mean, I would ask you not to engage in stereotypes, but did you think that the Black Birders movement increased did it bring out more people of color?
Twofold, yes.
birding?
I believe Black Birders Week brought the hobby, the pastime of birding to more audiences than ever before. And not only did it increase that awareness, but it also connected a lot of people who were birding previously. Black Birders Week 1000% has increased the visibility of black birders, and I have met so many other black birders that I didn't know before the week existed. I thought before Black Birders Week existed, I only knew one other birder that was black in Western New York. Since this has started, I have now know we got a handful of us that have been out there doing their thing, but it wasn't until this week and the visibility and the connection that it brought that allowed just for more people to see themselves in the birding community, engaged us to each other, to more collaborative efforts, and now just so proud of how big the event's grown and how it is now a recurring yearly event that is just getting bigger and bigger each year and bringing more and more people into the birding movement.
You love to hear it. Something good out of a negative situation. I looked up Danielle, Bellini, Sheridan, Alfred. I think those are those two of the people that started it, or
there was a whole group of people that came together. I wasn't as involved with the national group at that point. I was really excited to host some events locally, and it was
you had been holding it down before the movement started. You were already you were blackbirding before it was a thing.
Yeah, and then I was really excited to see this movement. I started doing what I call rogue Blackbirder Week events before I got officially affiliated with the planning committee, and just to try and get more blackbirding events happening here in Western New York. And now, just this past year, we had 2 walks that happened. One here at Reinstein Woods, one in the city of Buffalo at Riverfront Park in Erie County. So it's really exciting to see, like you mentioned, how much good has come out of such a terrible event.
Well, we're standing right now on like a pier or a
boardwalk,
observation deck per se, overlooking a very, very serene pond, right?
Yes. So.
And I hear a sound. There it is. What is it? It's like a strum of a guitar.
Yes, that's exactly what I call it. It's like plucking the string of a banjo. What you're hearing, that is a green frog, specific species. Not only are birds fun to listen to their sounds to identify them, but you can also do the same thing with frogs. Each individual frog makes a unique call. So we're hearing the green frog chorus right now.
Just to keep painting a further picture for our listeners, this pond is very, like I said, very serene, very colorful, because it's a bunch of lilies with a very bright pink flower on every other lily, it seems like.
Yes, this is
so we got to talk about the fauna
aptly
also.
named Lily Pond after its most populous plant that you see growing on the surface, all of those water lilies. And Lily Pond, they are so numerous that it's lily on top of lily looking out into a sea of pink flowers. It is a local favorite of people coming to visit these flowers when they bloom. And they're an interesting flower. They open up, right now we're at the prime. In the middle of the day, they open up, and then towards the end of the day, all these flowers, they close up overnight, and they actually shut. So some people, the best time to view these flowers between 10 and 4 o'clock, because before that, they're usually closed. So we're here in their prime.
So they wake up and go to sleep like the rest of us.
Yeah, which the lilies, they also have, an interesting history. Technically, they are what we consider to be an invasive species here at Reinstein Woods. They were planted by Julia Boyer Reinstein, the wife of Dr. Victor Reinstein. And because they are historic to the property, we do leave them here on Lily Pond, but they are a pretty aggressively growing plant, as you can see, as they pretty much take over this entire surface of the pond here.
You touched on 2 things that I was eventually going to get to, but one, the founder of this nature reserve, Dr. Victor Reinstein, and his wife, they donated 300 acres to Western New York.
Yeah.
How did the preserve come about in its history?
The history of this land, this is the ancestral home of the Wenro Native American people. Then the Senecas moved in, and the Haudenosaunee were living here. And when European settlers and colonists moved in, this land was developed or subdivided by the Holland Land Company. And a man named Dr. Victor Reinstein was tasked with essentially selling off a lot of the holdings that were here along Como Park Boulevard. The Bellevue Company, they were speculating that an electric trolley was coming to Cheektowaga, so they bought up a lot of this land, but when that never happened, they hired a lawyer, Dr. Victor Reinstein, who happened to be a lawyer, a doctor, and a self-taught engineer.
A jack of all trades.
Yeah. So he was charged with selling off a lot of the plots of land here along Como Park Boulevard, but he kept a huge chunk of land right in the center as his own personal nature preserve. A lot of the area that we are standing in right now was formerly farm field after it was settled. The forests were cleared, and this looked like one big farm, except for one portion of the preserve that is old growth trees that have not seen the plight of logging as heavily. But out here was farmland, and Dr. Victor Reinstein is who dug all of these ponds. He made all 8 miles of the roads and trails that go through here, and he planted tens of thousands of trees here in the preserve, and he is who is the architect that really transformed Reinstein Woods back to the state that it may have looked naturally before it was farmed. So as Dr. Reinstein made this his own nature preserve, he fell in love with the land so much that he wanted to keep this land permanently protected. So as he was getting up in age, he started negotiations. He tried giving it to the town, tried giving it to the county, but the stipulations or regulations prevented them from taking it on, and that is when New York State, the Department of Environmental Conservation, they stepped in.
A department you know fairly well.
Fairly well. And they stepped in to take over this land to forever protect it as a nature preserve. So this land is now forever going to be in a natural state. 2/3 of Reinstein Woods is opened to the public. You can come and walk on our trails. And to honor Dr. Reinstein's wish of having this be a nature sanctuary, we have 1/3 of the preserve marked as a sanctuary, where people are not permitted to be back there, and it is just purely a home for wildlife. So that is how Reinstein Woods came to be, and today we operate as an environmental education center. We have a building where we offer public programming, school programming. We do in-school trips, so we'll go to your classroom. We do as much as we can to engage people with the ecology, the nature of Reinstein Woods, and just to connect people to the ecology of Western New York in general. We do have one bird right up in this tree. One of our resident birds. It's a small bird about the size of a chickadee or a sparrow, which it happens to be. This bird is called a song sparrow. It's making really small chip noises right now and not giving us its song. But its song, it's a very long and melodic song that is the soundtrack of, what I like to think of the soundtrack of our bushes that are around our wetland areas. And usually they're calling all throughout the summer. Of course, this one must know that it's being recorded. It's being a little shy. But it's a small bird, brown colors, has brown streaks going down the front of it. A lot of beginner birders, they dislike the sparrows because it's a lot of minute details that tell them apart. Usually they call them LBBs, or little brown birds, and they keep on walking. So
LBB. Well, Marcus, I mean, you are an avid environmentalist. You certainly know your birds, your flora, your fauna. But as far as birds, what's your favorite bird? I know that's a
hard question.
Very hard question for somebody with a wealth of knowledge like yourself. But
and I think I give a new answer every time I answer it too. So for the record, this might be different. No. I think one of my favorite birds is a really quirky bird called the American woodcock. It is a football-shaped bird that looks like a shorebird that should be running around the beaches. It has this really long bill, a 3-inch bill, but instead of finding it along the beaches, it likes hanging out in our forested areas. And it has a really funny walk. It does like a weird little bobble back and forth as it walks, trying to shake up all of the earthworms in the ground that it then uses that big bill to probe. And it has...
I wish folks could really see this, because you mimicked the movement very well. Like you got it down. It's like a strut, kind of like a wobbling strut.
It's not going anywhere. Not needing to go anywhere fast. It has a beautiful call.
I was about to say, you have a good knowledge of birds, but I have a good knowledge of bird note. That was your bird note episode.
That was, yes.
You did the woodcock.
This is Bird Note. I'm Marcus Rosten, and while working for the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, I assisted in a study into the behaviors of one of my favorite birds, the American woodcock.
What I loved about it was with every bird note episode, you get the bird song. And the woodcocks one, you tried mimicking it very well, but I'll let you do it.
All right.
It's a peent.
It's a pink, pink,
Peent, peent,
pink,
peent.
pink. It just hangs out in the bushes. It just lets out that peent call right as the sun is setting. And it's just a bird with so much character. It has a beautiful sky dance that it does as its mating routine. After it lures in its mate with that painting, they fly up straight into the sky. They circle together in a giant fashion, and then they come plummeting back to the ground together. And that is how they do their mating dance and their ritual for courtship. So very cool bird. I think that's probably my favorite because I got to, when I was working with the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, like we talked about in that bird note episode, we put backpacks on that bird to track their migration. So I got to see in real time how birds connect us up here in Western New York to, in that case, the ocean shores of North Carolina, where that bird hung out over winter. So,
Now, Marcus, I wanted to also mention, well, one of my favorite birds is definitely a tropical bird. It's toucan. Which I'm from a tropic area, originally South Florida, so it's got to be a tropic bird. But also, I love owls. So I have to go back into my past to one of my former shows that I worked on, the Dan Libetard show with Stu Gotts. We had an animal expert from Zoo Miami named Ron McGill. Shout out to Ron McGill. And one of the great revelations that he gave that still sticks with me to this day, owls are always seen as this very wise, old, smart creature. You know, in reality, one of the dumbest birds around. Is that correct?
I don't want to throw shade at the owls, but in terms of intelligence in birds, I would not say that owls are that species that I would put up there. They're nothing. They don't have the same, intellectual prowess as, your corvids. So your ravens, your crows, your jays.
You don't think of those, but those are the African greys. The parrots are like among the smartest. They can identify like micro machine cars and whatnot. But then these owls get this rap of being so smart.
Unless you watch Winnie the Pooh, the owl in Winnie the Pooh, it lets you know that they're not very wise up there.
He did keep to himself a lot. He was very much like a very recluse almost, but yeah, owls, good PR agents for them.
Yeah, and Reinstein Woods, great place in Western New York to
The
come
horned owl.
and see owls.
Right?
We have throughout the year, great horned owls visit and nest here. Barred owls will visit and nest here, and eastern screech owls. So 3 owls, the species of owl that could be seen pretty regularly here at Reinstein Woods. So the fun thing about birds is they make you stop whenever they're around. And what we're looking at is we're looking into Lily Pond, and we have the top predator of our ponds hanging out. And here at Reinstein Woods, the top predator of our ponds is really tall, long legs, silver blue body with a giant bill. And it is our great blue heron that hangs out with those long stilt legs and hunts for pretty much anything that is unsuspectingly swimming by. It feeds on our fish, frogs, salamanders, almost anything that heron can get into its mouth.
Now, like most herons, very long, elongated, skinny neck.
Yes.
That thing can take down a frog?
That thing could easily take down. I've seen
That's
it
impressive.
swallow a 12-inch catfish. You'd be surprised when they open that mouth what they can fit down that throat.
That's beautiful.
Nice.
I doubt we're going to hear from the blue heron because he's too busy looking for grub.
They're generally a pretty quiet bird. You usually only hear herons when they kind of get spooked and they'll take off of a pond and let out like a giant grunt. Almost sounds like pterodactyl-ish. But we here in Western New York, we have, well, what herons are, they are a colonial nesting bird. So while we see this one heron here by itself, they do nest in colonies, in groups. And here in Western New York, our largest, what we call a rookery, happens to be right here in the Niagara River, the archipelago of islands coming off of Grand Island. That is Strawberry Island, Motor Island. Both have nesting colonies of herons. So those green, they have, well, great blue herons, great egrets, and black-crowned night herons. They'll hang out in those rookeries. And then at the beginning of the day, they fly out into the various ponds, wetlands in Western New York, find their feeding hole. They'll hang out, hunt for the day, and then they'll typically fly back to their rookery and hang out in a colony. So when you see herons by themselves, they're usually hunting and fishing, but they actually nest all together, and that is when you hear herons the loudest. They sound almost like you're going into Jurassic Park when you're in those rookeries. Those birds squawking. Yeah, they're featherless. They're pooping all over the place. It smells. It's loud. It's gross, but that is, a really cool environment to be in, to see, how those birds do it. And yeah, we're lucky to have that rookery right here in the city of Buffalo.
What other places would you recommend to our listeners to once they dip their feet into the small reserves that we have? Ooh, is that a water snake?
That is a common garter snake that just slithered off of the path into the brush off of the side. They love coming out onto the rocks on our trail, and they'll hang out and bask in the sunlight. That's what I tell kids. The best way to find snakes is just as you're walking to listen for them as they scurry off to the side as they
slither away. Yeah, he was right on the side of the gravel and just slithered away in seconds.
We do have common northern water snake here as well. So my biggest hint is if you're seeing them on the side of the trail like this, it's probably a garter snake. If you're seeing it sunning itself on a log on a pond, it's probably a water snake. So yeah, we are lucky here in Western New York. We're sandwiched in between two Great Lakes, the largest freshwater ecosystem in the world. We are right in between. We have that 30-mile long Niagara River that connects them with ever-flowing fresh water full of food, fish to feed a bunch of wildlife. So yes, we are in a very lucky spot in terms of ecology. So there are many places for people to get out and enjoy the wildlife in Western New York. From here at Reinstein Woods, you can go down downstream, follow Cayuga Creek all along the Buffalo River. We have a lot of natural habitat areas like Riverfront Natural Habitat Park, Seneca Bluffs, Tift Nature Preserve right over there, Times Beach Nature Preserve on the harbor. You start moving upriver, you got Strawberry Island, Motor Island, that archipelago that you can see from places like Aqua Lane Park in the town of Tonawanda, or head out to Grand Island and check out Beaver Island State Park to see where that Niagara River splits into two branches, carrying all of the water that powers Niagara Falls.
Shout out to Grand Island. That's
beautiful place with Buckhorn Island State Park, Marjorie Gallagly Nature Preserve, Spicer Creek Wildlife Management Area. Grand Island is a nice little, it's the heart of the Niagara River.
It's a grand place to live too.
Yeah. So lots of places to check out. You start going into the lower river after the water plunges over Niagara Falls. You have the entire greenway of parks from Whirlpool to Devil's Hole. You start going towards, after the escarpment falls down, you have Stella Niagara Preserve, owned by the Western New York Land Conservancy. And then all the way at the mouth, you got Fort Niagara. So all along this corridor and then stretching inland, a whole bunch of wild areas in Western New York to, explore, to get in touch with, the wildlife that exists here. We got some of our typical residents hanging out here on Flattail Lake.
Look like geese.
They do. They are our Canada geese. They love hanging out on our lake. They'll spend their summers here. They'll lay eggs on our islands and hang out on our ponds.
Nice monochromatic mix of black, white, grays, black bill.
I don't know if we can hear it. There's some twittering. All right, am I supposed to call it Xing now? But
I don't know if folks are going to like our jokes or hate our jokes. I know they're going to hate my jokes.
but what we just heard is the flight call of American goldfinch. They're commonly heard right now. They are our latest breeder. They just got done breeding in July. And you can hear them flying over. Their flight call sounds like they're saying, potato chip, potato chip, potato chip, as they fly over.
Marcus, as we hear the campers off in the faraway distance, I have to ask you, how did you begin your ecological journey? How did you get to becoming an environmentalist? When did the environmentalist bug bite you?
Growing up, I just wanted to spend time outside. I grew up right here in Cheektowaga. I grew up to a single mother in a very small apartment. So outside was my place of solace, my place of adventure exploration. The abandoned railroad tracks that went between my neighborhood and the airport is where I did my nature exploration. So it was born from that wanting to be outside as much as possible. I was in Boy Scouts and grew up going to summer camps each year. And it was through all of those experiences that I realized that, hey, I could work out here. I spent each year going, my family, we didn't take vacations going anywhere. The only place that we went was for a week camping at Allegheny State Park. So that is my happiest place in the world. And it was there that I went on a walk by a naturalist. The first time someone's ever taken me into the woods and were able to point at plants and give them a name. They're able to pick up a plant and tell me that this plant is actually edible. You can eat this, but no one will talk to you for the rest of the day. And of course, being a kid and amazed, I had to take her up on it. And I ate my first wild onion that day.
Oh.
And sure enough, nobody wanted to talk to me for the rest of the day because they are a very potent plant. So it was from there that I said, wow, I want to be just like her. I want to be able to take people through the woods, know what is around me, be able to interpret that natural environment, and also have my workplace, my office, look like a side of a lake in the middle of a forest, floating on a kayak in a wetland. So that is my motivation to go to school for environmental education and interpretation at the SUNY College of Environmental Science and Forestry, and continue my career path into the natural sciences.
I figure you get a different experience every day at the office, because depending on the weather, depending on the time of year, you don't know what to expect almost.
That's what I love about it. It's always different. I can do tours or do a school group out here, day after day, back to back, and every single time is a unique experience. It's always changing, and that is why I absolutely love this field so much, because nothing is static. It's ever changing with the seasons, with new environmental challenges that need to be managed. There's always something to do, something to happen, a new thing to learn. You can never say that you know everything out here. I'll be the first to say I do not know everything out here. But there's always something new to learn and to be engaged with. So yeah, that is why I absolutely love this field. Love having the outdoors be a workplace.
You also don't have to be John James Audubon to come out and enjoy bird watching. And I mentioned that name. This is probably a very clunky segue, but to a very serious topic. But recently in the news, there was the controversy surrounding, as the aforementioned John James Audubon. It was
named after him 50 years after after he died.
Okay, well, so he didn't even start it. It was the premier bird
conservation
organization in America is named after John James Audubon, which later was found out to have some very questionable views on enslavement, was an enslaver himself, and naturally the conversation then turned to, what do we do with the name of this foundation, of the society? As a person of color, what are your thoughts on that? It was determined that they were going to keep the name as is.
Yeah, so
Are you a member?
The national chapter. I am not an official member of either the national chapter of the Audubon Society. They do have a whole bunch of local affiliate groups. I do work with our local Buffalo Audubon Society, but there is now, thanks to Black Birders Week and the movement of birding getting a little bit more conscious to these issues and grappling with this idea of having an enslaver be the name of this conservation organization, which wasn't started by him. It was named after him, and is that a good fit going forward with how much we know about his history, his views that we're anti-abolitionist, anti-emancipation, and do we want this person to be the name of an organization? If you ask me, I'm going to say, well, the reason that they say that they want to keep it is, everyone thinks of Audubon being synonymous with birds whenever you hear that. But from my point of view, I talk to younger generations and say, who is Audubon? And they say, I don't know what you're talking about. That was a guy's name. It was actually just this morning I was talking to somebody about, Audubon. I'm like, wait, that's an actual guy? So I am
It's not a roadway in Germany?
or that's running through, the north towns along UB. So I am of the view of there's no reason to fight to keep the name of an enslaver as the name of an organization that should be working to bring everybody into this movement. So I don't even think that the name Audubon going forward is as that connector to people as it may have been back when the birds of North America and Audubon's work probably was the way that people were getting into the field of birding. We've moved past that now, so I am of the belief that why hold on to this name when it has so much connections to such a dark history, and it doesn't work to bring more people into the world of birding, bring more people into the world of conservation. If anything, it detracts from that mission of bringing everybody on board. And we have very large-scale problems that we have to tackle in the environmental world, in bird conservation. So I think we need as many people coming into the movement as possible, and holding on to the name of an enslaver, I do not think empowers more people to see themselves in that movement.
And Marcus, what would you recommend to amateur people that are on the fence about entering the hobby, the what is birding?
I mean, the first thing is to recognize that you're welcome out here, that you are designed, you're meant to be in these natural and wild spaces. A lot of times that first hurdle is the apprehension of
just getting out.
People might be afraid of what's out here, getting lost, and a lot of those fears are valid, come from, places that they deserve to be there a lot of times.
We saw a garden snake.
Yeah.
That was pretty intimidating.
But at the same time, just getting over those barriers and getting out, I think, is the first step. And the more time you spend outdoors, the more it just starts to, wrap its arms around you and bring you right in. And it starts to be, a really slippery slope to where I want to learn what, that one bird that I saw this one time, I want to learn what that bird is. And suddenly it turns into, whoa, wait, I saw a couple of other birds while I was out there. And just slowly add, to your species knowledge, individuals, and you'd be surprised on just that amount of time. It doesn't all come at once. You can't just go out in the woods and suddenly expect to know everything. But the more time you just steep yourself into it.
Like any good journey, you start in one spot and you don't know where it takes you.
And it starts to become a part of you. And we are living in a time now where there are so many tools that allow you to learn, to interpret what you're seeing around you. There are great apps like Merlin for bird ID, iNaturalist for any species ID, that if you don't know what something is, you can use your camera and post it and someone will help you identify it. Merlin will identify the calls and songs that birds are singing, so you don't need to have a birder right next to you to start learning some bird calls. You could,
there's an app for that.
Empowered with those apps and just getting outside is, I think, easy first step to do to really start falling in love with the wild spaces around you. One of the best ways you can get in touch with that is we have North America's only international birding festival happens right here in Western New York. Birds on the Niagara happens in February, and we put our Niagara River and the birds that overwinter here on a pedestal. It's one of the reasons that we are a globally significant important bird area. So come to the Birds on the Niagara. You can take a bird walk with me along the Niagara River and realize, why are crazy people going up to Niagara Falls in the middle of frosty mist coating your face? There is a great reason to be out there, and it is because of those birds. So join the Birds on the Niagara Festival in the winter. Get out, maybe walk on your own in the spring, summer. We have public programs here at Reinstein Woods. Audubon Society, our local chapter, they have walks, ways to get involved. So I have to acknowledge them as we walk by. The cool part of our older growth section of our forest is that it is a great place to find fungi and mushrooms, which happen to be some of my favorite, where we're looking at
I thought you were a fun guy. Wow, these
fun guy with a fun guy. It's the name of my program coming up in October. Stay tuned, everyone. No, but actually it's October 28th.
Hey, I like that. Plug away, please.
But right here we're looking at a downed beech tree that has started to have its moss grow on it, but coming out are these shelves of white mushrooms that a lot of people might actually know. These are oyster mushrooms. So if you've ever eaten an oyster mushroom, you can find them growing right here in Western New York on our dead, decaying logs. They look like nice little white shelves coming out.
Look at this guy.
We have tons of milkweed growing here along our trails, and right here is a monarch caterpillar. Monarch caterpillars, they have a symbiotic relationship, which means that they have, well, essentially just a relationship with milkweed, and that monarch butterflies will only lay their eggs on this group of plants called milkweed. So if you want monarchs, you need milkweed, and if you don't have one, you'll lose the other. So
most widely known of butterflies, I would say, right?
I would say so. It's very popular. It's known for its big migrations. It will migrate from northeast United States all the way to the south into Mexico to overwinter, and along the way it makes a bunch of friends. Everyone loves seeing monarch butterflies, but they are also a good example of a flagship species, one that will need protection. We need to work to make sure we improve areas for monarchs, but monarch is really just kind of the poster child, because once you start improving the habitat for monarchs, a lot of those other pollinators are also benefited in the midst of that. So that's why we like to use monarchs as kind of that gateway organism. Get you in the door, make you fall in love with an insect, fall in love with a caterpillar, fall in love with a group of plants, and then you start to, by extension, start falling in love with more butterflies, more plants, and then suddenly you start to see it for the entire ecosystem it exists in. So, but monarch butterflies are that great species to grab the hearts and the attention of the public and get them to start to love individual species and then start to love their native habitats as well.
On the adjacent plant, there's these spiked pieces of fruit. What is that?
What you're looking at is the seed pod. So milkweed, it has a beautiful pink flower. After that flower is pollinated, they grow these spiky pods that inside contain a plethora of seeds. So in the next month or so, these pods are going to mature, and then they're going to crack open. All of those seeds have a nice little tuft of fibers to them, and then they will fly off to another location in the wind and populate more milkweed plants. So that milkweed pod is a good identifier characteristic. You have those big leaves that come off that central stalk, and then as you can see, as I was playing with this one, all that milky substance that comes out, you can see that's why it gets that name milkweed, because as growing throughout its stems and its leaves, when it's broken, it exudes that milky substance. And that is what those caterpillars like to eat. And because those caterpillars are feeding on this milk from the milkweed, that actually makes those caterpillars toxic and unpalatable to birds and other organisms that would otherwise eat them. So that's why they have those nice bright colorations on them, to essentially give a warning saying, hey, I'm toxic, don't come over here and eat me, don't mess with me, or else you're going to pay.
To humans as well, or?
Probably. I don't know. I haven't tried.
And as far as any other, like, are there any other exclusives like that? Like you mentioned the ducks that migrate to Grand Island, the wacky zany ducks. Is there anything else like that that's exclusive to this area? You mentioned in the wintertime also we get a lot of Arctic birds, but I feel like a lot of along this area we'll get a lot of that. But anything specific to us out here?
Our claim to fame is because of actually a group of birds that a lot of people disregard and they don't like. I've heard them call them really mean names like rats with wings. But
yes.
the reason that Western New York is a globally significant important bird area is because of our diversity of gulls.
You can see them in the falls, in that PBS Nature episode.
Yes.
That was a big portion of that.
We have one of the greatest diversity of gulls that you can see in one area in the entire world. We have 18 species of gull can be found along the Niagara River corridor throughout a given year. So we have this idea that gulls are they're a parking lot bird, that bird that's stealing my French fries at the beach. But people will travel across the world to come to Niagara River because you can see our typical ring-billed gulls, our herring gulls, but we have little gull, Sabin's gull, mew gull, the largest gull in the entire world, great black-back gulls hang out along our river. They are the size of eagles. We have birds that will come over from Europe, our lesser black-back gulls. They will come across the Atlantic to hang out here in the rest of New York along the Niagara River. So what is unique here is that diversity of gulls, and great place is the Birds on the Niagara Festival. Get a taste for all of those birds that otherwise, for general public might not see the value in what they would call a seagull. But those birds, they are a really cool, fascinating group of organisms, and they put the Buffalo Niagara River on the map.
Well,
what we're listening for is a bird that actually says its name at the top of its lungs. It's screaming, "Pee-wee! Pee-wee!" It's a small, minuscule bird that has gray markings, nothing really too distinct, pretty drab looking, but it gets to the top of its treetops and it will scream its name, "Pee-wee! Pee-wee!" across the entire woods looking for a mate.
it's just called the peewee?
An eastern wood peewee is its formal name.
Eastern wood peewee.
There are other species of peewee, but they are the only peewee that we have here in Western New York.
On the other side of the coin of wildlife management, we have the endangered species. What do we have out here in Western New York that we should be protecting, that we should be on the lookout for?
We have a bunch of species that need protection. It all depends like what group of organisms. For birds, right now, one of the birds that is it's kind of common here in Western New York, but in terms of statewide, we actually have the most significant numbers, and it can be found right along our waterfront. Our common terns, which despite their name being common tern, they are a species of special concern here in New York State, that we're working to increase their habitat along the Niagara River to give them more places to nest. We have rare, threatened, endangered turtles like Blanding's turtle that are right here in our watershed, or spiny soft-shelled turtles. People will probably be surprised to know that right in Ellicott Creek that flows right by UB, there are actually spiny soft-shelled turtles that will hang out right on the banks of that creek that are suffering from increased destruction of their habitat loss, water pollution. But you can see them right here. My favorite animal, which I did already say woodcock was there for birds, but my favorite animal is likely the lake sturgeon, which is an ancient dinosaur-like fish that can grow 6 feet tall, weigh over 250 pounds, live for 150 years. They're right in our Niagara River, and while they're that giant fish that seem imposing, they actually don't even have any teeth in their mouth. They just have little soft suction cup lips, and they have little whiskers that go down from their nose, and very charismatic fish, but they are also one that is suffering and is a threatened and endangered species that needs our help to preserve. So there are a lot of those gems that we have here in Western New York that are looking for our protection, and a lot of organizations, they are working to protect and restore them.
What are some of the I guess the premier conservation groups out here in Western New York? Thanks, Pee-wee.
Great question. Premier. There are a lot of conservation groups that are working.
Besides the New York State Department of
Environmental Conservation. I mean, the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, they are our New York State agency that is working to protect our land, air, and water. You also have the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. The Lower Great Lakes Fish and Wildlife Conservation Office is right here in Western New York. They are working on studying our native fish, our lake sturgeon, our lake trout. Those are two species of concern that they're working to restore, but they're also on the front lines of aquatic invasive species detection. So Fish and Wildlife Service, you have our nonprofit groups that are working to protect land, like the Western New York Land Conservancy. The Buffalo River Land Trust is also working, like right in the city of Buffalo. People like Western New York PRISM, which is the Western New York Partnership for Regional Invasive Species Management, they help give assistance to a lot of natural areas like Reinstein Woods to manage just those invasive species. They have strike crews that work all summer working on terrestrial species. They have boat stewards that work at each individual boat launch throughout Western New York, and there's a program I used to run where we have educators standing at boat launches and checking boats as they come in and out, educating boaters to make sure they're not transferring species from one body of water to another. So because a lot of our challenges in the environment are so multifaceted, we are lucky in Western New York that we have so many environmental groups that have missions that are unique but overlapping enough that it makes this nice quilt and patchwork of organizations that are protecting our wild areas and our wildlife.
Now, among the trees, and they stand out a little bit because I assume these are some sort of pine?
Yes. Technically, this is some sort of spruce. What you're looking at is a Norway spruce tree. These ones were planted by Dr. Victor Reinstein. Where we are in a more temperate broadleaf forest, so you're typically seeing your deciduous trees, your regular leaf trees in the Western New York area. However, Dr. Victor Reinstein did plant I think like 30,000 conifer trees here at Reinstein Woods, which is a little unique for the area and is really useful for wildlife. And that's one of the reasons that we are such an important area for wildlife, is in the middle of winter when all of our broadleaf trees, they lose those leaves. The only thing that is left green are our spruce trees, our red pine, those trees that were planted by Dr. Reinstein, and those then give the wildlife that exists here over the winter their cover. So a lot of times you'll see white-tailed deer bedding underneath them. I'll find barred owls roosting up top, and it really gives an extra feature to Reinstein Woods that surrounding areas don't have, and the animals and the wildlife really appreciate. There's a blue jay right here.
Oh, I love the blue jay.
Ready.
Beautiful blue bird. It's fun fact, it isn't blue in terms of having blue pigment. What you're really looking at is the light refracting and reflecting off of the prisms that are contained within its feathers, which give off of that blue. So a lot of times you'll see the blue of blue jays change in character based on the cloudiness or how overcast the skies are.
Wow. See, there he goes.
And thinking of intelligent birds, they are up there with some of our more intelligent birds in the same families of crows and ravens and jays. Those group of corvids, they have been observed using tools, being able to recognize faces, and be able to be trained to do things like, I swear in the UK, they train them in London to like pick up cigarette butts and things like that. Is that a bird or is it a cat? This is a call that gets people confused. It actually led to the name of this bird. This bird is called a gray catbird because its song is very mechanical and melodical, but its call sounds almost like a cat meowing in the bushes. So every so often, people will hear, wait a minute, is that a bird in the bush or is that a cat meowing at me?
Well, we are back at the Education Center here at Reinstein Woods. So that, I think, means the conclusion of our fun little jaunt into
We've flown full
fullness.
circle.
This has been great. Well, I, for one, have had a great deal of fun. I figured it was going to be fun. It's been that. It's lived up to it. I hope, like I said, that our audience has had as much fun as we have had on this excursion. But Marcus Rosten, thank you so very much for being our guide, for taking us around and showing us this beautiful sanctuary that we have here in our midst of Western New York. I thank you as the host today. Dallas, thank you for joining us. You can see some of our shots hopefully online on WBFO's multiple social streams on Instagram, YouTube, at WBFO.org as well. But thank you all for joining us today on this very special What's Next field trip edition, I guess. Summer field trip edition. Thank you so very much. Marcus, thank you.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to seeing everybody in our wonderful wild spaces that we have here in Western New York.
This has been What's Next on WBFO and WBFO HD1 Buffalo, WOLN Olean, and WUBJ Jamestown, your NPR station.
Pink. Pink.